Wave Act, the Web3 software company that understands what you want.
Well, quick about myself. I'm blockchain engineer. So what I do on a day-to-day basis, I actually work on the blockchain. I write programs on it, and I build applications that people can use when engaging with the blockchain. But what all that is, what that means, and all these kind of things, that's what we will talk about briefly today. So that's been. Uh, since that we only have around, I think, 30-20 minutes, something like that, and I also want to have some Q&A with you guys. I definitely want to uh, give you the basics, which means what is blockchain on both the conceptual side of things, but also from a tech perspective. And then if we got some time left, we'll try to set up our own wallet if you don't have that already, and then we jump into the Q&A. So let's go. Starting out, blockchain itself. The simplest explanation I can give you today is it's a bank that nobody owns. What does that mean? That means, like, if you go to a bank today in your local town, there's always like someone or some institution managing and actually owning your money, which means if you put your deposit your cash there and they go bankrupt, then the only thing that protects you from there on to actually get your money back is the legal framework, which means if the government says, hey, the bank went bankrupt, but they had to keep a certain amount of cash on the balance sheet to give it back to you if they run out of money. So that's kind of the main idea. So why blockchain? What is that? In its simplest terms, as mentioned previously, it's a bank that nobody owns. You can think of a big book, something like that, a big book that keeps track of everything you do on the blockchain. Every time you send something like $100 to another wallet, another bank account, so to say, another person, it gets saved on the blockchain. And when that person sends it to someone else, the same sum or different amount, it also is saved onto the blockchain. But where is the blockchain saved? The blockchain is saved on a lot of different computers all around the world. Someone in China, someone in Africa, someone in America, and so on and so forth. And nobody typically knows who those parties are. And these parties are independent as well, but more to that at a later point of time. So in its simplest terms, it's a database, a bank that nobody has control over, which means, in fact, if we keep track of our money on that database, we actually own that money. There's no government, no regular traditional bank, not big tech like Google or Alphabet, Facebook, or whoever that can actually censor or control your money. So that was the original kind of vision. And of course, you can save a lot of other things on the blockchain as well. That's where NFTs and these kind of things come into play, where creativity and all these other potential use cases come to fruition. So I said a lot of things now, and I know that might be a little bit like, what's going on? But let's jump back a little bit. Like, how did the internet actually start? Way back then, there was no TikTok, no Facebook, nothing like that, because all we had from the very beginning, that's for example the first website ever created that you see here, we only had something like a library, like a digital library. A location, a website was nothing else than a source of information. That's what people were able to do on the internet. That's it. Of course, there were some other tiny things, but that was the main use case of the internet. Getting information, democratizing information. At a point of time, we got all these awesome apps that we are using now today: WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, Amazon, Google, and so on and so forth. And what this enabled us is actually interacting with other people. So it's somewhat, we could say, democratized, I don't know, society, getting together, like engaging with people all around the world, not just reading from the internet, because we are now able to save onto the internet. We are able to upload pictures and all these kind of things. But what we will be able to do is actually owning these things, owning pictures that we have uploaded, owning the money that we are using now via online banking through the awesome services our traditional banks have set up for us. So that comes, of course, with certain consequences. We are dependent. We depend that these organizations don't screw us up, or they don't screw up. So that's kind of the main issue with that. We have centralized services. They have all the power, which is nothing bad inherently, but it can be something bad. And for that reason, we got Web 3.0. And all it does is it tracks or saves certain information on the blockchain, which means, if we think back to the initial intro, it democratizes money in like also ownership. Oh, I think democratizing ownership is a great metaphor here. Like we actually own things, whatever that is. Is it money? Is it identity? Is it artwork? Is it whatever you can imagine? Whatever you think actually makes sense. So if the platform ceases to operate because they went bankrupt, or uh, like something else happens, you always know for sure that you get your money back because you actually own it, or at least you were able to see on what rules they were operating on. So here a nice little overview. We have these very old applications. Some of these maybe don't exist anymore, or completely work differently and have entered Web 2, for example. But as you can see, Web 3 also has a wide ecosystem already, and that's where we will be focusing on. Sorry? Question? So let's get a little bit more technical, and I will keep it simple, I promise. So when we look at the term, the word blockchain, block and chain, that might mean, and in fact it does, that we have a chain of blocks. So I think we all know what a chain is, which is something that's in that chain is repeating itself. But we don't know for sure in the blockchain context yet what a block actually is. So what is a block? A block, in its simplest terms, is just a bundle, a collection of transactions. Which means if I send my best friend $100, I send my mom $50, and my dad sends me $20, all these three transactions might be combined into one block, into one bundle of transactions. And that bundle of transactions is then signed in a cryptographic way, sealed, which means nobody can change it anymore. And it also includes the last block, which means the last set of transactions. So what does that mean, and why do we do that? So every time we get new transactions, like here we have one block of one set of transactions, we seal it, we sign it, we say, hey, that's fixed, that is not supposed to change anymore, neither the amount, the recipient, the sender of the money. Then we wait a couple of seconds, milliseconds, whatever. When the next block comes, because other people want to send and receive money, then we do the same. We collect all these transactions, bundle it into one block, and include the previous block, which means we also use what happened prior to the newest transactions and seal it again. And that creates the chain because we always use the previous block, which includes all other previous blocks, which means every block, every set of transactions, if we say it that way to simplify, has all the transactions of the full blockchain in some way included. And that gives us a unique security, which means in the whole blockchain, nobody can change a tiny thing, which means nobody can change like the last decimal of a transaction, which means if I send my mom $100, she can't just change that $100 to 100.0000001 for 1 cent or like one super nano cent, whatever, because it's all sealed and mathematically protected on the blockchain. Simply because every time we create such a new block, we include all the previous blocks. So that's the basic idea. That's really in its simplest form the blockchain. So this, for example, what you can see here, that hash is the representation of a block, for example, or can be the representation of a block. So that fixed length value includes all the information you want it to have, which means, for example, if you want to make sure, let's take a book, for example, you have a book and want to make sure that nobody is changing one letter in that full book. What would be the first approach most people would take? They would try to learn every page by heart or copy it, maybe, which might be more reliable. A lot of work, but it's more reliable. And then if you want to check at some point, you just compare every page. Is it still the same? Is it still the same? Is it still the same? Which takes a lot of time, especially if the book gets larger and larger and larger, which is the case for blockchain because more people want to do something on there. So a very simple alternative to this is to create such a hash, a key, so to say. It's not a secret key, everyone can know it, but that key includes every letter, every page of that full book. And a blockchain, in its essence, is also just a book of transactions. Yeah? And a block can be a page that includes a certain set of transactions. So in that case, we can always see and verify like if that value is the same, that nobody has changed a single white space, letter, value on the full blockchain, or in our book example, any word in that full book. And that's how the blockchain works. That's the lock here, basically. We create such a hash, that's just a name for it, which includes all the transactions. And nobody can change these transactions anymore. We know that these transactions generate this hash. And if you change something, the hash will look completely different. That's the idea of this. So there's one major thing that we want to go over here, and that is the difference between distribution and decentralization. Because when we think about what we do have today, for example with Google Cloud, Amazon Web Services, all these big tech companies that provide their services for small people like us that want to host or create a website, for example, they have that website saved, right? So the idea of distribution is like if they mess something up, if on their servers there's maybe some kind of a fire breaking out, which sometimes happens, that not all the websites of all people on the world are down. That would be very, very bad. And for that reason, these big tech companies do something very simple in its essence. They just have another server in a different place that serves as an alternative if one of these two breaks down or burns down or something like that. Or there's a water damage, like a lot of things can happen, earthquakes, and that's distribution. We just make sure that if one server breaks down, we have another server that is able to provide its service to people like us that want to use our website, for example. That's distribution. But these servers are owned by one company usually, which means the company itself can decide gets access to what, who is able to create websites on their platform. And if they went bankrupt, they will shut it down. For example, you need to move to another company, and all these kind of things. So there are certain pain points involved with that. And that's what we have now, today. That's the state of the art, right? But what we don't have today, or basically what the blockchain in its essence is, we do have the same advantages with distribution, which means like if one server breaks down, the blockchain still works, but the blockchain is owned, managed by all sorts of people, all sorts of companies around the world, and they don't even know each other personally. And that's the main idea, because then not one company can decide, I don't like you, or I'm bankrupt and I can't do this anymore, because all these other people, all these other companies can still do it. They can still serve the people that want to use the blockchain. And that's the main difference. The blockchain, as we know from before, it's just a big book of transactions, of things that you do on that infrastructure, basically, which can be uh, doing things that a bank does by sending, receiving money. It can be lending, borrowing money. It can be creating NFTs, like these little cute ape pictures that people trade for a couple $100,000. All these kind of things, and that works because it's about ownership. You own your stuff, because not one party, not one company is controlling everything. So, really quick, because that might be more relevant for you, how do I get how do I get actually into that space? Like, what are some really, really, really basic things that maybe help me to enter the Web3 space and actually engage with people there? So one of the first principles that I want to share with you here, there are within the Web3 community a lot of different mindsets. Like if you go to Bitcoin people, they will talk differently, they have different opinions, as such as the Ethereum community, the Solana community, the NFT community, the Cardano community, everyone thinks different. So if you want to work within the NFT space, you maybe want to get familiar with like what are NFTs about, what is the vibe, the mindset people have within the NFT space, and what is also like how do they talk with GM and these kind of things. When you go into the Bitcoin community, they don't care at all about all that stuff. They are just about decentralization, security, all these things that we have discussed before. I want to own things and I don't want people to take it away from me. So yeah, that is the main overview over all of that. And with that, I would say let's take a break here or stop here so that you have some time to ask your questions. And I hope it was not too much or too fast.
Wave Act, the Web3 software company that understands what you want.